Amazing. So just so everyone's aware, we have a chat channel, which I'm sure you can all see. So if anyone does have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to use the chat channel. We very much like a sort of a collaborative environment. So it should be good fun today. Today's going to be a short webinar, roughly around about 20 to 25 minutes. I know you've all got busy diaries, so we're just going to be covering sort of the basics of prospecting, utilizing information and experience you've already have to make the most out of your opportunities. So we're not going to take up too much of your time today, but if you do have any questions throughout, then do feel free to use the chat. So we do have a slide which is just going to be covering some headlines of what I'm going to be talking about today. So I'm just going to flip through to the contents page just so that you can see what we're going to be covering. So just bullet points roughly is we've got being aware of your marketplace, collaborating with your team or teams, portfolio reviews, dedicating the right time to prospecting, and then we do also have a follow-up webinar, which I'll touch on a bit later as well. So we'll get cracking, and the first one that we're going to be focusing on today is being aware of your marketplace. So to start with, before we actually jump into that, I'd just like to say that not many agents tend to actually prospect for lettings properties. For various different reasons that might be, but most of all, I'd say that the main sort of reason that we hear is that it's too difficult to prospect for lettings properties. However, equally, because of that, very few landlords actually receive prospecting material. So there's not a lot of competition out there in that space. So there should be quite a lot of low-hanging fruit for agents to be able to pick up on and capitalize on opportunities there. The other thing to remember before we jump in today is that a lot of landlords out there aren't particularly happy with their current service from their existing agencies. But most landlords have the mindset of it will be too complicated to switch agents. My current agent has all of my legal documentation, safety certificates, ASTs, keys, tenants information, maintenance information, etc. So in actual essence, it's really easy for a landlord to switch agencies. You as the taking over agent would do all of that, or the majority of that work for that landlord. So we need to bear that in mind when we are prospecting landlords, and we need to educate the landlords that it's our job to take over that, and it's really easy to switch agencies, and we can take over the majority of the workload for you. So just bear that in mind when you are doing some lettings prospecting. So just to jump right in then, we're going to start with being aware of your marketplace. So some of these might come across as the very basics of letting agency and prospecting. But if you are covering all of what we've gone through today, then I would say that you are definitely in the 1%. So congratulations. If you're not, hopefully you take away some quite good insights from today's short blast webinar. So how many of you in the chat can say that you check your local market activity daily? And when I say daily, I mean properly as well. That's not just receiving your Rightmove alerts to say that a new property is coming on the market. How many of you have a team member or yourself scan through what is gone on Rightmove and Zoopla and the property portals each day to see if you're familiar with any of those properties that have come about? We've got some people saying daily, some people saying no, daily, already set up, fantastic. If you're doing it already, that's great. If you're not doing it, then it's something that you might want to check, and I'll run through the reasons why. So if we're looking at, for example, today, X amount of properties have come on the market, do we recognize any of those properties that have come on the market? Have we let it before? If we have let it before, or we do recognize those properties, do we have contact details for those landlords still where we can get in contact with them? If so, then our teams need to be picking up the phones and capitalizing on those opportunities quickly. We all know how fast the rental market moves, with property staying on the market not long at all. So it's a good opportunity to try and get a multi-listing if you do have contact details for those landlords. And if we do pick up the phones to those landlords, there are certain hooks and conversation openers that might be much easier than others. So for example, if you've spotted a property that hasn't had a rent price increase in the last 10 times it's been on the market, then that's an easy conversation starter for a landlord. And I will show you how all of this is sort of automatically brought to your attention in the next follow-up webinar we do when we go through Spectre, but we'll touch on that a bit later. If you can appeal quickly to a landlord, then that's something that the landlord cares about, then it's an easy way to open up a larger conversation and build a relationship. If we don't have those contact details, could we find those details somewhere? Can we find the property number? Can we spot a board when we're doing a viewing down the road and check the property number and write to the owner? Can we land reg it, for example, to try and get those landlords' details? There are some ways which we don't have the landlord's details that we can obtain them and we can still communicate with them. And I know most people will say, well, how do we get in contact with the landlord? There's multiple ways, really, and not all of them are going to be 100% successful, but at least we can say that we've tried. We can write to the rental property if we know it's vacant. Some landlords might be there doing a bit of maintenance in between tenancies. Some landlords might have a mail redirect where direct mail can go straight to their home address. And if we use the land registry, sometimes, more often than not, you will find the landlord's home residence to be able to write to as well. And just touching on scanning through the marketplace, a good question and something that I've had personal experience with before is, do we have the right people checking this information? That's the local market activity. And I'll give you an example of my experience. I used to task, and I'm sure many of you do, checking local market activity for my negotiators or an administrator, because it's kind of like an administrative task. And quite often or not, we weren't very successful with some people recognizing properties that we actually already have information for. The estate agent and letting agency industry is guilty for a high turnover of front end staff. So you might have someone here who has minimal experience, a year to 2 years within that role, and they might not fully understand your portfolio. When I was working in letting agency, we were managing a portfolio of around 500 to 600 properties. So anyone that had like a year's experience or 2 years experience didn't really understand fully the entire portfolio that we dealt with. So asking them to check the local market activity wasn't necessarily largely that beneficial. And it came to light when I was having a conversation with one of my property managers who had been in the business for over 20 years. And I know that's quite a rarity, but if you do have those gems, then they're going to know a lot of information about your portfolios. And when I was having a conversation with her going through the market activity, it was, I recognize that property, I know that landlord, I've been out to that one, and that was for quite a lot that was on the market. So it's asking yourselves the question is, do we have the right people looking at that market activity, who has the experience, who knows your portfolio, who may have been out or had conversation with those landlords prior? That's where I think more benefit would lie, in dishing that responsibility out to the right people. Anyone got anyone with a vast amount of experience doing that, or do we all tend to sort of give that task to negotiators or valuers or administrators? Be keen to sort of see the feedback there in the chat channel. Got Matt saying, yeah, lazy. 10 years plus, fantastic. Cool. So that's very much covering the basics of checking your local market activity. We'll move on to the next part of the webinar then, which is collaborating with your team. So many companies have both sales and lettings departments, but tend to operate as separate businesses, although you're all under one roof and one brand. So it's making sure that you collaborate with your sales teams to ensure that you've checked if any sales applicants have been registered that are looking to purchase with buy-to-let purposes or investment purposes. Have sales registered or spoken to anyone who's looking to expand or sell a portfolio, for example. And quite often or not, sales and letting agencies work off two different CRM systems. You'll have a letting system, CRM, for back-end maintenance and front-end, and you'll also have a separate sales system which covers all the front-end sales and sales progression. So if your business is working from two different systems, then what I would strongly recommend doing there is giving access to your sales system for your lettings team, so that they can confidently in their own time scan through a list of sales applicants that have been registered, and they can start spotting hotter opportunities to have more conversations or deeper conversations with potential investors or people looking to sell or expand portfolios. So that's a really good way. And I know that a lot of agents might say that they do that. Having morning meetings with your sales team is a fantastic idea. Just looking back at the last week, what's been registered, what's been looking to purchase, is that a good rental opportunity that property's been purchased for? Yes, it is. Okay, let's have a conversation with them, see if they might want to rent it out, and trying to keep that business as well. How many people here in the chat channel tend to sit down with their sales team? Be curious to see the feedback on that. Sam says they get a lot of leads from their sales team, clients looking to break chains, slow sales, not going anywhere. So daily, fantastic. Seems like everyone seems to be covering that. And how many people work off two different CRMs as well, and have access to the other CRM so that you can confidently go through that Excellent. So we've got some people on the same CRM. If you've got the same CRM, fantastic. That makes that life a lot easier. Good stuff. So we'll move on to our next slide within our webinar today, which is covering quite an important one, actually. And I think a lot of letting agencies don't cover this within their service. So this is portfolio reviews, and portfolio reviews is quite a broad term, but I would say more so landlord service reviews. So who here on the chat channel checks in with their landlords purely to see how they are finding your service by telephone? I'm not talking about a check-in email, writing a review on Google or Trustpilot, or sending them a poll platform. I'm talking about actually contacting your landlords by phone just to check in them. Hi, Mr. Landlord. Just a call, courtesy call. How are you finding the service that we're providing you? Is there anything that particular that we can do for you better, or anything in particular that we're not doing for you? I think this is a really important thing, and the reason why I bring this up is because most letting agencies are guilty of only getting in touch with landlords when they need something. And when I say by need something, I would say maintenance issues, inspections, inventories, renewals, rental arrears, or new tenants, so renewal of tenancies, properties coming to market when notice has been served. I would say that most agencies get to contact with them when you need something from them, not actually just to see how they're finding your service. So you can actually use those calls to the benefit of actually exploring your current landlord's portfolios far better. And the way we can do that is we can use these calls firstly to start off with is checking in on a regular basis. How happy are you with the service, which we've covered shortly. And then we can use that conversation, if it's going well or they appreciate that call, to lead into a discussion around their portfolio or their individual property and their future plans for that property. I bet we don't know what people's plans are. You might have a landlord with one property and their plan might be to grow that, but he might not have had, or they might not have had any help with learning how to grow that portfolio, or they might have plans to sell it in a month's time. So it's also finding out about their future plans. You might discover when you're talking to a landlord and you've actually got an idea of their situation that they might have a lump sum of cash in the bank and no idea what to do with it. So you might have great investment opportunities on your books with your sales team that you could recommend to them, grow their portfolio, and then obviously you've got a nice new quick win there. They might want to expand. We might get a mortgage referral out of that conversation for if they're looking to buy another. And you might, and most agents will be guilty of this as well, thinking that you have all of the properties that that landlord has on there with you on their books. So for example, the amount of times I speak to agencies, yeah, I know this landlord, they've got 3 properties with us and that's all they actually own. I've got all of their properties. And that's actually not the case more often than not. What we find within Spectre system is that when agents upload their data, we actually start to identify landlords who they think they've got all their properties with, but they have 2 or 3 or 4, even more properties with various other agencies. And that can then start to open up a conversation of, well, why do you list with other agencies? What is our service not doing for you that's made you look elsewhere or spread that portfolio over a number of agencies? So it's a really good opportunity. Just one thing that I strongly recommend that I found beneficial when I was in agencies is to give those service reviews. And what we also need to remember is that word of mouth marketing is the fastest way to spread good news about your agency. So take an example, you've done a client service review with a landlord. They found that great. They really appreciate you spending time with them and actually listening to what they want. They're at a social event and they're speaking to someone, one of their friends, and their friends are thinking, I'm thinking of buying a rental property, or I've just bought a rental property. The first thing that landlord's going to say is, well, you should use my agency. They're absolutely brilliant. They check in with me regularly. They look over my portfolio. They've got my best interest at heart, and they keep my property maintained, rent coming in on time. And that's where conversations start to happen. I can imagine a lot of you get recommendation referrals for instructions and valuations and market appraisals. So making sure that we provide the absolute best service to a landlord is going to be far beneficial for your agency, your brand, and your reputation within your local areas as well. And I hope that you all take away quite a lot from that and start implementing some landlord reviews and not just getting in contact with them when you need something from them. How do people find that scenario? Do people find that comfortable, uncomfortable to do? Any reservations as to why we think that we don't do that at the moment? Be keen to hear your thoughts there. I'll leave the chat channel going. We've got people saying haven't got the time to do it. Everyone else finding that time is an issue. We've got Gary says it's a can of worms. It's a good point, actually. Why do we think it could open a can of worms with an agency? Is that because we doubt what we're doing? Are we feeling that we are giving them a subpar service to what we do? Landlords aren't shy coming forward with issues. And it doesn't need to be an issues call. It depends on how you completely depends on how you phrase that call. Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, I'm just giving you a quick courtesy call. I just want to know how you're finding the service. I want to make sure I'm providing you the best service as possible. So have you found everything okay to date? Is there anything that we could be doing better? And that's a productive call. That's a constructive call. That shouldn't open a can of worms into negativity, because at least you've highlighted it with them. And if you didn't do that, you'd be none the wiser, and they'll probably go look for another agency. And you'll be like, why have they gone to another agency? But you've not found out that information. At least you're giving yourselves the opportunity to try and change that service and change their mindset of your agency. So a lot of you have mentioned time, which is a really good point, which actually brings me on to my next slide, which is dedicating the right time to prospecting, to growing your portfolios. And it's a really important one. And as with all industries, whether it's letting agency, sales agency, even being a prop tech supplier, if you're doing prospecting, you need to dedicate the right time to it. It can't just be I've got 5 minutes, 10 minutes spare. I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to try and do some prospecting. And the reason why it can't be that is because the minute you get the first negative call, or where a call outcome doesn't come your way, you're not going to do it again. You're not going to go on to the next call. You're going to be demotivated and you're going to go back to your normal day-to-day tasks. So making sure that you dedicate your time or time for your team, approximately 40 minutes to an hour is all that's necessary. We call that here a power hour. And that's making sure that within that 40 minutes to an hour, you have switched off your distractions. You're solely focused on prospecting. So you can turn off your notifications, turn off your emails. You can divert your phones or get another team member or department to cover the phones just for that 40 minutes, which I don't think is hard ask. And then once you've got that dedicated time, you need to try and also get your teams into the mindset of prospecting. And when I say the mindset of it, I call it a bit of like a hype up time. So for example, and I'll use this, I don't do this personally because I'm lazy, but if you went for a run and you finished a run or did something that gets your adrenaline going, after you've done that event, you're going to feel ready to take on a new task. Your adrenaline's pumping through your body. You're going to feel up, ready to go. So what I like to do here at Spectre is we give the team like a hype up time, 10 to 15 minutes prior to going into a prospecting event. And we'll get them listening to some motivational music if that's what gets them going. Go for a quick walk. Anything that you can do to free up their mind of their current workload so that they can sit back down and focus on the task at hand. They're not sitting back down and they're thinking about the last task that they were doing or something they've got to do later on today. Their mind is clear. They're focused on prospecting. They're focused on contacting current clients for landlord reviews. They've got that dedicated time aside to be able to do that. And also what we can do there, and most importantly, when we are setting these power hours or 40 minutes, however long you want to do it, make it enjoyable for your team. Make it fun. Gamify it. Throw an incentive in there for the person who can get the most positive results off the back of the calls. Set up a friendly competition. Whoever wins, you'll buy them lunch or you get lunch for the team. Make it enjoyable. Don't make it a grueling task of prospecting. It doesn't need to be. It can be fun, it can be friendly, it can be competitive. And if we gamify it, you're going to find that productivity in those power hour sessions is going to significantly increase in comparison to just throwing something into a 10-minute, I've got 10 minutes spare, I'm going to do some prospecting. So dedicating the right time, I would say, is vastly important to getting the most productivity out of yourselves and out of your team. And that can be said for anything that you're doing. It doesn't have to be prospecting. It can be, you've got to sit down and you've got to do, write up a few market appraisals that you've been out to. Dedicate the time to it. Get yourself psyched to get in the mood for it. And you're going to find you're going to get the best possible you out of that 40 minutes to an hour. So that covers dedicating the right time. Like I said, it was a short blast webinar, roughly 20 to 25 minutes. So what we've got as a follow-up for the next webinar is we're going to actually do a deep dive now for our Spectre clients into how we can control the most of that, or how we can conduct the most of what we've discussed today within Spectre lettings efficiently. And we've also got some great content tips for lettings, prospecting letters to landlords as well within that webinar. That webinar is going to be next week. So please do register. You should have a pop-up on the screen to register now. If you are not a Spectre Lettings client, but you would still like to attend to see what Spectre Lettings can do for you, then please get in touch with us. We'd be more than happy to see if we can squeeze you onto that webinar and show you the power of Spectre Lettings. I'll leave the comments and chats open for any questions at all. We've got people asking if we can email the recording of this webinar. I would say yes, absolutely. We will get that recording out to you. And I'll leave the chat open for a couple of minutes. Hopefully that hasn't taken up too much of your day, and you've gleaned some really good insights out of it. We will be following this up with a really good webinar next week as well. And there's many webinars to come. So I hope you all enjoy your day. Get out, have a beer, a wine, enjoy the weather, and I'll see you all next week.